And now let's continue work on the health system script, and let's open the health system script again. And from the last video, we've implemented the hit effect, so now we have a visual feedback whenever the bullet hits the object. Now let's create a new function to check the health. So we can just type the return type void, and we can call this method check health. And inside this method, we can just add an if statement, and we want to check for the current health value. If it's less or equal than 0, and I add a less comparison because sometimes the current health value can get below than 0 if the subtractor or the damage value is bigger than the less health amount. So for example, if the less current health amount is 1 and the damage is 2, then it will become -1. So we need to make sure that we check if the value is below than 0. And if the current health is less or equal than 0, then we want to destroy the game object, or we want to make this game object or this entity to die or to get destroyed. So here inside the current health method, let's create a couple of comments for the code that we are going to create later. And the first, we are going to create the code to destroy or to make this game object die. And we want to also check if it's an enemy, then we want to add a point or score. And now let's create the death system. So head back to Unity and let's create a new script inside the scripts and then gameplay folder. Let's create a new C# script, and we can call this death system. And we want to also create another C# script, and we can call this create object. And this create object script will be used to instantiate another object upon one object death event. So when there is an object that we want to destroy, when the death systems is invoked, then we can trigger this create object to create another object such as coin or explosion. And now let's open the death system script first, and let's just delete the start and the update method. And we need to declare a couple of variables, and I've already prepared the variables, so I'm going to paste this and explain this one by one. And the first variable is a type of boolean, and I'm going to call this destroy, and I'm going to set its default value to true. So this will decide if we want to destroy the game object visually in the scene, or we want to leave the object enabled on the scene. For example, the ground enemy, we want to keep the object on the scene, but we want to add a flame and explosion effect whenever that game object is beaten. And for the second variable, the type will be a float, and we can call this destroy after. And this will decide how many seconds we want to destroy whenever the death is invoked. So it will be the delay for destroying this object. And the third variable is a array of create object class. So we can just hook the create object script into the slot later when we want to spawn the object. For example, if we want to spawn the explosion and the coin, then we can add two different create object script into the slot here, and each will instantiate the different game object that are being set up in that script. And the last variable will be a type of Unity event, and this is for invoking another method from another script whenever death is occurred on this object. So we can chain another method to this Unity event here, and this Unity event will trigger the other method that are added to the Unity event entry. And for the Unity event, we can just call the method on death event. And to use this Unity event, we need to import the Unity engine.event namespace. So let's just add this above here by typing using and then Unity engine.event. And once we add this namespace here, you see that the Unity event keyword turns to blue, and we don't have these red squiggly lines anymore underlining the keyword. And let's save the script, and let's go back to Unity, and let's select the cube game object. And now we want to add the death system to it. And this is how the Unity event looks like. And we can add an entry, and for each entry we can add an object, and for that object that are put inside the object slot here, we can trigger the function from each of the object components such as transform or other script, and we can trigger any function from that component here. So for every object that we add to this onDeath event, we can trigger the method, and whenever we add those entries, when this onDeath event is invoked, then all of the trigger listed in these entries here will get executed. And basically, we need to invoke this event whenever the health runs out. And now let's add the start method first. And on start, I want to get all of the colliders that are attached to this game object where the death system is attached to. So we need to create a private variable, and for the type we can just use the collider array, and we can call this colliders. And on start, we want to grab all of the colliders, and we can use the get component, the plural form, which is get components, and this will get multiple colliders, and it will store all of the colliders into this collider array. And we need to pass the type, which is collider, and then close it with a set of parentheses because this is a method. And now let's create a new public method with a return type of void, and we can just call this death. And now we want to spawn all of the spawn objects that we are assigning to this create object array variables. So let's just create a for loop, and for the length we want to pass the spawn object's length, and this will return how many create object script that we are assigning to the spawn object slot. And we can run the spawn function, but we haven't implemented this yet, so we are going to implement this later. And below here we want to add an if statement to check if the destroy boolean value is true, and we can just write the shorthand version. Just type the keyword, and this will check if the boolean value is true or not. And if it's true, then we want to destroy the game object. So we can just use the pooling manager dot instance, and we can just use the return object method, and we want to return this game object. And for the delay, we can just pass the destroy after variable. And now we want to disable all of the collider, so we need to create another for loop here below. And for the length, we can just use the colliders variable dot length, and this will return the number of the colliders that are being grabbed on the start. And let's just disable using the index of I. So just type colliders and then pass the index using a square bracket. And we want to access the enabled property, and we can set its value to false, and this will disable the collider component. So for example, for ground enemy, if we don't want to destroy the game object, we want to leave the game object on the scene, we can just uncheck the destroy boolean, and this will prevent the pooling manager from returning this game object, but the colliders will still get disabled, so we cannot shoot the enemy further. And using the spawn objects array, we can create a flame effect to indicate that the enemy has been defeated. And let's save the script, and let's go back to health system script, and we want to add another variable. And for the scope, I'm going to set this to private. And for the type, it's going to be the death system. And let's just call this death script. And we want to grab the death script on start. So now let's create the start method. And we can just assign the death script using the get component method. And for the type, we can just pass death system. And here below inside the check health method and inside the if statement, first we want to check if the death script is null or not. So if the same game object where this health system is attached to has the death system script attached also, then the death script will not be null. And if it's not null, then we want to run the death function. So let's just type death script dot death method. And for now, I think this should do the trick. Let's save the script again. And let's go back to Unity. And now let's try to destroy this cube here. So let's press play. We need to hit a couple of times before this object gets destroyed. And as you can see, it is not destroyed, so there is probably something wrong with the script. So I'm going to pause the game, and I'm going to change the inspector to debug. And here, as you can see, the current health is -6, so there is some issue with the script. And as you can see, the death system is registered on the death script slot. So now let's check the script. I see there is an issue here in the health system script. So basically the issue is the check health here. We already declared the check health method, but this method never gets called. So we need to call this inside the take damage. So whenever the object hits a bullet and taking a damage, we need to check its health. So let's just run this method here below the current health line and save the script. And let's go back to Unity and let's try it again. And now as you can see, once the health is depleted, the game object gets destroyed. And on the next video, we are going to continue working on this feature.